Sarah, do you want to go ahead and put up the first slide and just
Sure.
get ready? Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Forest Carbon University webinar. This is our final webinar, actually, with the carbon market providers. Forest Carbon Works. We're just going to give we'll give a minute or so for everybody to get in as we're waiting. As always, we'd love to know where you're zooming in from today. So please put your, who you're with, what you do in the chat box. As introductions, I'm Melinda Gable with the Forest Landowner Foundation. So if you guys could do that, that would be appreciated. And we'll just wait a few more seconds here and then we will get going. Thanks so much. All right, Lee, thanks for putting that in. We got Arkansas. I know we have Florida. We've got New York. Helpful to see who else is here and what state you're representing. So Sarah can maybe speak to that as she's going through her presentation. So encourage you to please put what state you're from. We will get started. So as I said earlier, today is our final webinar series of our market providers. It's been a great Forest Carbon University webinar series. We've had lots of great dialogue. Yesterday, we did this presentation with Sarah with landowners, had over 30 landowners from around the Southeast and a few other states as well, and had really good conversation. Just as a reminder, the purpose of these webinars and the reason we have our landowner webinars and then we have our state forester or forester consulting webinars is to give you and provide an environment that is for you to ask questions separate of your landowner constituency. So you feel very comfortable. This is all about gaining knowledge. We're all at different levels. This field is constantly evolving, and we're going to even probably get into some of that discussion today. Forest Carbon Works was at our conference, the Forest Landowner Conference up in Maine back in June, as were I think most of the market providers who presented throughout the series. And since then, they've all adopted and changed their program a bit. And it's all about making this work both for the forest landowner as well as for the market that is seeking these carbon credits. So we're going to get into that discussion today. So as Sarah gives her presentation and questions come up or comments, put them in the chat box, put them in the Q&A, and at the end of her presentation, we will have a discussion. So with that, Sarah, thanks again for joining us. Look forward to this discussion.
Great. Just trying to unmute myself over here. Thanks a lot, Melinda. Thanks, Michelle. And I'm really happy to be here. This has been a really great webinar series. And we're Forest Carbon Works happy to be wrapping it up. So again, I'm Sarah Ford, and I am with Forest Carbon Works Chief Forestry Officer. And see, we have a nice mix of locations that everyone's coming from today. Thanks a lot for joining. And I am in Stowe, Vermont, actually, so fairly close to New York. Got one or two northern representatives online. So at Forest Carbon Works, we're really trying to create carbon market access for family forest owners across the country. And really our mission is about long-term conservation. And so we're really trying to make long-term conservation both possible and profitable for landowners of all sizes. And so what this is about is securing legacies via providing a diversified revenue stream through carbon for landowners. And so today I'm going to give just a quick overview of our history, our company history, explain why we focus on long-term conservation, and also get into some details about how our program and process works at Forest Carbon Works. So probably, as a lot of you already know on this call, over a third of our country is forested, with some areas being very highly productive, depicted on this map here, the Southeast, Northeast, Pacific Northwest. And these areas capture and store more than 900 million tons of carbon annually, which offsets 16% or so of our US emissions. 39% of these forests are family owned, meaning they're non-industrial, privately owned, between 5 and 5,000 acres in size. So this really presents this huge opportunity for both climate mitigation and carbon storage, in that 40% of our land ownership, forest land ownership, is owned by a family forest owner. With this ownership and this potential for carbon storage, at the same time, the average landowner is 70 years old or older. And so this is also presenting this large risk in land generational transfers and land tenureship. And so this is really just only increasing the significance of finding ways for landowners to keep their land, to reduce that risk of parcelization, fragmentation, degradation. Hence our focus at Forest Carbon Works on long-term forest conservation. So we got our start at FCW, Forest Carbon Works, under the umbrella of our former parent company, EP Carbon, under which we started focusing on small family forest owners back in 2016, actually. And so EP Carbon actually is a global carbon development company, building larger carbon projects internationally. And to date, they've completed more than 45 projects internationally, protecting more than 13 million acres. And so this is really significant because with our institutional knowledge and our foundation at EP Carbon, we brought decades of carbon expertise to our team at Forest Carbon Works. So with that initial focus and launch of our platform focusing on small landowners in 2016, we completed pilot inventories and then went on to actually successfully verify and complete our first small landowner focused project in 2018. This was actually in the compliance carbon market, which at that time was the smallest compliance landowner project to date at 117 acres. This is really significant in that, especially in 2018, forest carbon projects of that size were really unheard of. We're currently almost entirely doing projects in the voluntary market. After finishing that project in 2018, this is when we really entered into this phase of growth trajectory. So we started additional projects in 2019, broke off from EP Carbon into our own public benefit corporation in 2020, continued in growing and scaling until March 1st of this past year, where we were actually acquired by Chestnut Carbon, where we've really been on a rapid growth trajectory since that time. So we're currently headquartered in Minneapolis. We have about 40 full-time staff on our team. We're spread between the Pacific Northwest, California, Lake States, Northeast, Southeast, and Appalachia. And about 50% of our team is either foresters or with forestry backgrounds, like myself. So I want to just start with just a really quick recap of voluntary carbon market. And I know I mentioned compliance before, just because there's really some really significant differences between the way in which the two markets function, and therefore the types of projects that come out of these markets, or that are actually producing credits for these markets. So the biggest difference between the voluntary market and the compliance is that really anyone can participate in it. It's not mandatory, hence it's the voluntary market, unlike the compliance market, which is part of the California Cap and Trade program, and it is required for participants to be in that marketplace. So therefore, there's no requirement for emissions reductions, and there's no oversight in the voluntary carbon market. There's a pretty large spectrum of projects, therefore methodologies and quality in credits coming out of the voluntary carbon market. And so this is really starting to come to light a lot lately in a lot of news and a lot of media is credit buyers in particular are really starting to demand more quality in the carbon credits and the projects that are producing these credits, which we'll dive into a little bit. Something really interesting that is not new news about the voluntary carbon market is just the amount of demand for credits in this marketplace, with all of the net zero commitments, 1.5 degree pathway, et cetera. The demand is way outpaced the supply. It's projected that the market will need to grow by more than 15 times actually for us to, by 2030, in order for us to actually reach our 1.5 degree pathway commitments. So that really, in our opinion at Forest Carbon Works, I think is really just supporting the need for more quality and perhaps more regulation and oversight for the market as a whole, as more, and you're going to see more and more credits and players within this marketplace. At Forest Carbon Works, speaking of quality, really quality and integrity are just an integral part of our program. I mentioned long-term conservation. That's really the foundation of what we do in our projects and our product. We only use approved methodologies to develop our carbon projects. These have been peer reviewed and are approved by carbon registries. In the voluntary market, we're in Verra, the Verra Carbon Registry, which uses the Verified Carbon Standard. So we're using an approved methodology under Verra for our projects. Another thing that's therefore really important, speaking of quality, that I think buyers are really starting to be more interested in is how real and measurable are your credits. Our credits are calculated with on-the-ground inventories to determine our carbon stocking and therefore credit yields. And this is also repeatable because of the way in which we're doing these calculations, these quantifications. Another hot topic, which I know has been discussed a couple of times, at least over the duration of the webinar, this webinar series, is additionality and leakage accounting. And so we use conservative accounting for both additionality and leakage within our methodology, which is another really important piece within all carbon projects that is getting more and more attention these days. Our long-term focus for our program and our mission really supports multiple and many co-benefits, including soil and water protection, wildlife habitat, social and economic benefits, and just many, the list goes on and on as far as the just immediate co-benefits that are attached to the long-term conservation for our projects. So as far as the type of forest carbon project that we're developing at Forest Carbon Works, ours are improved forest management, similar to many others that are doing what we're doing. And so just a quick recap of what an improved forest management carbon project is. These are projects that are changing forest practices and management in the long term compared to what would have been there or how that management would have been in the absence of the project. And so this is resulting in that additionality, really important for the project that's yielding additional forest carbon storage and sequestration. Usually this is achieved via alterations in harvest frequencies and intensities. And so this image is showing that additionality in the teal section in the middle, with the baseline for the project being demonstrated by that gray dotted line at the bottom. The baseline for our projects is determined using regional data that's inventoried on a repeated basis, in addition to regional harvest information as well that's specific to each of our project areas. And then the green line at the top is showing the actual carbon stocking in the project area over the duration of the project lifetime. It is changing, not one straight line, but rising and falling to show changes in management activities over the project lifetime as well. We complete repeated inventories and verifications over the lifetime of our projects to really confirm changes in stocking and therefore additionality as part of the requirement for our methodology and all of our carbon projects, which is really a critical component to quality and integrity. So now that I've gone over just a little bit about our just foundation at Forest Carbon Works, what type of projects we do, I'll get into just a little bit of how our projects work. So our minimum acreage requirement of Forest Carbon Works is 40 forested acres. To enroll, you have to own your timber rights. You can't have any overly restrictive easements that would prohibit you from harvesting, because therefore there's no additionality that's created from the carbon project. There's no alteration in management activities. You do have to enroll all of your forest ownership for our program. This is to avoid the potentially increased harvest activities on another portion of your ownership as a result of you entering into our carbon program, which is considered leakage, activity shifting leakage. So it's to avoid leakage, this type of leakage at least. And also you cannot have participated in another carbon program. And to date, this is a requirement between all programs, because there's not an established way to avoid double counting of the amount of carbon that's been credited between programs. And so regardless of the length of the contract, unfortunately, this is the situation right now, but all of us are working on trying to overcome this, I would say. So as far as responsibilities for the landowner within our program, I've been mentioning long-term. Our program is 125 years in length. And I will get into more detail of this and break down the different timelines in a couple slides coming up. It's required to provide access to our team, our forest technicians, when you enroll, so we can complete inventories as needed over the lifetime of the project. If you do want to harvest, which is allowed, all we ask is that your harvests are coordinated with our foresters and our team and your forester as well. And I'll also explain a little bit more about that coming up in another slide. The most regular requirement for our landowners is to complete annual reporting. It's an online form, like a forest management activity report. Pretty simple. It's just to document your forest condition each year for the purposes of the program. So breaking down the 25 or 125 year period into two different sections. It's broken into a 25-year payment period and 100-year legacy period. The 25-year payment period is further broken down into 5-year contracts that align with both our third-party verification or audit and repeated inventories that we complete over that 25-year period. Throughout the 25 years, our landowners or members receive annual payments that are made on a per acre basis. So that's payment every year. Those start at $10 per acre. We provide forest management assistance via our foresters and our forestry team. This assists with harvest needs, any harvest adaptation, coordinating harvest to make sure they will work with the requirements of our program, and say if you're entered into a tax program, also to achieve compatibility with the tax program that you're in. With that comes any potential update to an existing forest management plan or adaptation to a management plan if you also need that. During the 100-year legacy period, there are not annual payments made to the landowner. However, you do have the option of renewing your 25-year payment period for another cycle before you go into the 100-year legacy period. Harvesting is still allowed in the 100-year legacy period, and there's actually a lot more harvesting flexibility because there are not credits being issued off your project anymore. You only have to maintain what you've been credited for above that baseline over the duration of the legacy period. The legacy period is really meant to just keep your forest under management beyond the period over which you've been getting credited in payments. We still oversee this entire process, and that's the 100 years beyond the 25 years, and that's via a long-term monitoring trust. So the way our process works to actually enroll and sign up, if you're interested or know anyone who's interested, is all handled via our website. It's a very simple process. You simply go to our website, apply online. As soon as you apply, you're connected with someone on our customer team, a membership advisor, who then will help facilitate the remainder of the process for you. It's a real person who reaches out to you immediately, who is very personable and very good at distilling this typically very complex process. After you've completed that application, entering in your forest land parcel information, we'll evaluate it. And with a blend of spatial remote forest management plan data, we'll determine a payment amount per acre and present to you an offer of membership for that first 5-year contract period. You still are committed to the 125 years, but our first payment cycle that we're presenting to you is 5 years. This is for a couple of reasons. We want to allow for flexibility in both management, repeated inventories, and adjustment in pricing and carbon, which would happen at the next 5-year cycle when we go out and complete another inventory to reflect that. After you sign up to be a member, we'll send someone out to do our first level of inventory, helps us prepare for our verification or our audit. We then complete the audit. It's a blend of desk and field. We're doing these every single year for our entire aggregate of landowners that are entered into our program. And then you start to receive annual payments. So you're getting paid every year. Again, we give you a payment immediately upon signing up with membership. And then we'll start to issue annual payments in years 2, 3, 4, 5 again. And you have to complete that annual report that I mentioned each year as well. So breaking down a few of those steps into a little more detail as far as how is it that we're figuring out how much carbon you have and the pricing for that carbon is, again, on the upfront, we're evaluating your forest stocking and carbon quantities, utilizing spatial analysis, any existing data we have, and that baseline differential amount, and remote data as well. And then we go out and we do an on-the-ground inventory to complement that. Again, our payments start at $10 per acre per year, and then we reevaluate and re-inventory every 5 years of that 5-year contract cycle within the 25 years. For forest management options and requirements within the 25-year payment period, I've mentioned that commercial harvesting is allowed. Another requirement that we do have with commercial harvesting is if and when you commercially harvest. So that's wood that goes to the mill, essentially, is our blanket definition of commercially harvesting. And we have more specifics surrounding that. We do require FSC certification for commercial harvesting. We have our own FSC group at Forest Carbon Works. So if we require, or if FSC certification is needed, we will facilitate that and cover all associated costs for the landowner. So any forest management plan adaptations that are needed to meet FSC standards, FMP writing for FSC certification, the FSC audit, that's all taken care of by Forest Carbon Works, because that's our requirement for our methodology that FSC certification is required. What FSC certification does is it adds another layer of quality to credit pricing that is able to be reflected back on the landowner. We do allow firewood removal each year between 3 and 10 cords, actually, it's not 8, depending on the size of your property. And again, just any removals, we need to know about it, just so we can document it and follow our proper protocol at Forest Carbon Works with our forestry team. That third-party audit that I mentioned, that's completed for your property every 5 years. So one right in the beginning when you sign up, and then again 5 years down the road. It's mostly being completed at the desk via the third party, just reviewing all the data that we presented to them. At times they will go out and visit properties. Usually it's on a regional subset basis. So they're not going to visit every single property that we're entering into the program. So you may or may not get visited as a participant in our program. So that was the overview of the Forest Carbon Works small landowner forest carbon program. And I say small landowner in that our minimum acreage is 40 acres, but we don't have a maximum. So it's really the family forest owner. We don't have a cap. So we've inventoried and evaluated properties starting at 40 acres all the way up to tens of thousands of acres as far as what we have going in our pipeline. And what's just really exciting about this focus right now on all family forest owners and small landowners is that, you know, there's many different developers who have just found different ways to streamline access. And so some of the ways in which we've found to streamline access is through via reducing our inventory costs. So we do an on-the-ground inventory, and we utilize a smartphone device that is actually collecting the same inventory data that a traditional inventory would complete. And so we've been implementing this for years via contract cruisers that don't have to be licensed foresters or foresters. If they are, great. We have a large pool of contract cruisers we pull from to go out and do a plot-based inventory. It's a photo-based inventory. And we have in-house software that we've developed for this, both on our phones and our devices, and then also back at our computers as far as how we're evaluating and analyzing and getting all the information that we need from that. So that's one of the really huge ways in which we've managed to cut costs and streamline. And also just via a lot of that institutional knowledge and experience in working in carbon with different programs in different registries and with different verifiers and third-party, those auditors over the last series of decades has helped us to amateurize and spread costs as well. And so we've really, I think, in a lot of ways managed to pass that on to the landowner and to really simplify what is still a complicated process, but really to just make it a lot more accessible for landowners via our customer team, our regional foresters, and the remainder of our staff at Forest Carbon Works. So this map is showing all the different areas where we are working, which is pretty much almost all states and in the US right now. And we have some that have a lot of interest and some that have less interest. We've got, I think it's actually really closer to 3,000 landowners in our pipeline applying for membership right now, and over 200 projects in development with nearly 1 million acres that we've assessed for payment and over $3 million assessed or allocated to landowners at this point in time. So we're getting new landowners coming into our pipeline every day. And there's just a lot of interest in what we're doing, which is really exciting. In addition to providing all of this to no cost to the landowner, being able to provide annual payments over the 25-year period that will reflect changing price in carbon and carbon stocking for the landowner. We also have a forester referral program, which pays foresters for clients and landowners that they bring to us as members. So we have a number of foresters that have already been utilizing this. We have a dashboard on our website that's for foresters, so they can sign up themselves as a referring forester and also enter their landowners into that dashboard if they're interested. And so our referral program pays 50 cents per acre up to 1,000 acres, then over 1,000 acres, it's $1 per acre. And along with that, we have that harvesting flexibility that I mentioned with FSC certification, and just really trying to allow for management to complement our forest carbon program. And because we really stand by quality and long-term conservation, we're only looking for buyers that align with that and that part of our mission. We're developing our carbon projects to the gold standard, essentially, especially with that long-term component. And so those are the buyers that we're after. That are after that gold standard credit, that are going to be paying more for those credits as well. So I wanted to spend just a little bit of time going over a new program that we're developing at Forest Carbon Works that's been part of our acquisition with Chestnut Carbon. So in addition to our forest carbon program for improved forest management, we're also building an afforestation or restoration program that's actually targeted in the Southeast right now during the first few years. And so this is really exciting. It's been a big focus of mine. So I just thought I'd spend a couple of slides just giving a quick overview. We have some pretty big goals for this program, being restoring 500,000 acres of native ecologically diverse forests across the US by 2030. In the shorter term, we're looking to restore closer to 50,000 acres over our first few years of our program. And so we're targeting degraded pasture lands. Afforestation means the area has to have been non-forested for 10 years prior to planting. And as part of this program, which is we're calling our Chestnut Restoration Program, we've identified all kinds of really exciting outcomes, really similar to what we're doing on our improved forest management side of our company, including massive amounts of climate mitigation, biodiversity protection, increasing forest cover, very large scale carbon storage and sequestration through emissions removals credits, which are very valuable to buyers in the carbon market right now, creating wildlife habitat and connectivity, local employment opportunities, community education, and also research opportunities to go with that. It's just a few of our outcomes that we've identified for the program. So for this first year, we've been focusing on Arkansas and Alabama. And we will be restoring about 6,500 acres of degraded pasture lands across 9 properties, mostly located in Arkansas, 1 in Alabama. We're in the midst of site preparation activities on these properties currently, just about finished as we are entering into planting season soon. We're planting hardwood and softwood mixes, over 15 species in total, really trying to achieve that diverse native ecosystem with this restoration program. And again, the land has to have been non-forested for 10 years. And as far as the carbon standard that we're using, we're in the voluntary market for this carbon program. When we get to that point under the gold standard, the projects or the parcels will also be FSC certified, really the larger goal being to restore these ecologically diverse, sustainable forests to these areas for the program. So part of the reason I wanted to mention this is, although we've been in-house with our chestnut restoration program this year, as we move into the second year, we're going to continue to focus on the Southeast and are looking for landowners who might be interested in participating. And so what we're looking for are landowners who own 300 acres or more of that open land, degraded pasture land that has been non-forested for 10 years and might be interested in converting it back to forest land. And we'll plant the trees and take care of all of the site preparation, tree planting activities. And there's an opportunity for the landowner to receive payments of $25 per acre per year. So we'll have more details to come on that, but just wanted to say plant that seed while I'm here. So as I wrap up, I wanted to just give one example of one of our members, some landowners in Oregon that really just speak to what we're doing, securing legacies, the whole long-term aspect, thinking of future generations. This is the Rowan family. They own about 250 acres in Western Oregon. And they're a really good example of how payments from our carbon program are just allowing them to continue both keeping their property in their family and managing it in a better way than they would be otherwise. They were close to liquidating all of the timber on the property as the only way to continue keeping the property and paying the bills, paying the taxes. And now they're able to not do that, to improve their forest management alternatively, as compared to what they had been doing previously with carbon payments, reduce harvesting intensities and secure their land for future generations. And with that, that's all that I have about Forest Carbon Works chestnut restoration. And if there are some questions, I would love to take them. Oops, I will stop sharing my screen.
Great. Thank you so much, Sarah. Really appreciate that. Good job going through all the details and updating us on some new programs you have. Yes, as Sarah said, please put any questions or even comments in the Q&A or the chat. And I've got a few we can just dive into to get the conversation going. So as I said, we're wrapping up with all of our different market providers who have given us their details. Given the commitment of the Forest Carbon Works is much longer, and as you stated, it is that gold standard. The quality is much higher, and therefore, I think your buyers are looking for that. So, how do your payments to landowners compare, given the commitment is so much longer to other programs?
Yeah, we really are trying to be competitive with our payments, and I would say that our payments are more than other programs for the most part. And some of that is dependent on the stocking of your forest and where your forest is located. And so we, unlike other, I'd say as a whole, our payments are more. And we also offer more flexibility in adjustment to payments reflective of where you're located than perhaps other programs do. So competitive and higher.
Okay, and I think you said that basically a landowner can go, they sign up online, and with today's technology and different data out there, you're able to do a preliminary assessment that then provides that cost back to the landowner, or that price that they would be paid. And they can go ahead and sign the contract, become a member before you actually go out to the land. Could you just kind of go through that again?
Yeah, I can. And so there's a couple different ways in which they approach that. And so you're right. We are asking landowners to sign the contract potentially before we go out to the land. And then we will visit the land after. Now, when you're a landowner, say of a certain size, if you own 5,000 acres, we will visit your land before you sign the contract to just double check and to verify that the carbon inventory or your carbon stocking aligns with what we have at the desk, essentially. And so we're confident with the dollar amount that we can assign to landowners on that per acre basis for the, outside of landowners above a certain size. There's a couple other parameters that we can present landowners with that first, that 5-year payment structure. And so we're not locking a landowner into the same payment price per acre for 25 years. It's only 5 years in that initial offer.
Yeah, and as I understand, because you're offering, as you said, you want this to work for the landowner as well as for everybody involved. So after 5 years, if the price of the carbon credits has gone up significantly, that price is adjusted to the landowner to reflect the current market. So how long do the payments extend out to the landowner? So you got 5 years. When's the next one? When is it? Does it go all the way to 125, or does it, the person who committed to it get to receive all the payments?
So the normal structure would only be, you would only be receiving payments for the 25-year payment period. You could start another payment period after the first 25 years and just keep getting payments. And then no matter what, you would have a 100-year legacy period tacked onto the end. Or you could stop getting annual payments after year 25 and just go into your legacy period. But for a lot of landowners, you're going to kind of get back into more of a normal management regime, say that you were in before you got into the carbon program. That's going to depend, I think, on the type of management you were doing and where you're located, what part of the country you're in. Because I mentioned you have to maintain what you've been credited, and that's what you've been credited above the baseline. So we're not looking at, clear cutting your entire acreage once you get into year 26, but, managing on more of a rotational basis, just again, making sure that it aligns with carbon program requirements. FSC certification, not required in the legacy period. A lot of those restrictions drop there. It's just confirming that, essentially you're not clear cutting your entire forest, that there'll be some forest remaining.
Okay, so after the 25-year period, you said the FSC certification is not required. So they would have already been FSC certified, but it's not required, so they can go in and harvest. But the restriction is still there that the harvest cannot be greater than the growth.
So the harvest could be greater than the growth after year 25, because that's dependent on, you're not getting credit anymore. So that's why, that's that flexibility that's really hard to verbally communicate. And so the harvest being less than growth has to do with wanting to still produce credits. So you've got something to go to the landowner and to support the oversight and management of the project. In your beyond year 25, it's just making sure you're keeping your forest really. And so you actually, you could harvest more than growth. And that's what I mean by getting into more of a normal rotational cycle. It's just, say you have that teal additionality that I showed in that approved forest management slide, that part that you've been credited, that's what we're looking at. You've got to, across your entire forest area, say you were credited a total of like 20 tons, just say, you've got to maintain that 20 tons, you know, over the whole 100-year period.
Okay. So it sounds like it's, yeah, not allowing your land to be developed after year 25 or putting it into solar or something. Somebody asked the question.
Yeah.
So 125-year commitment. We had this question yesterday as well. I sell my land after 25 years. Somebody else now gets it. What does that mean for this program, for that land, that tract of land and their commitment?
So the program, really the commitments to the land. I mean, no one's going to live 125 years. And so it stays with the land, and Forest Carbon Works will facilitate the transfer to the new landowner. So if you sell part of your land, you sell your whole land, that's the way that would work.
And that's really up to the landowner to disclose that. There's no, at the moment, and we've had these discussions internally, there's no process, you know, there's no recording of this or deeding of it. So the landowner has to disclose that they are committed to this type of program, correct?
So that's actually a really interesting point. And so with currently the way our program is structured is we do put an MOA on the deed. So it is therefore, you know, disclosed upon land transfer. And so upon a sale of the property, a new landowner would automatically be notified.
Oh, okay. Is that, do you know if other, is that different than other providers doing that, or is that becoming kind of the business norm?
I don't know. That's a really good question. I mean, I know because of the duration of our project, we have that. And at least as of for right now, that's the way our structure works. I'm not sure with some of the others. I mean, shorter term projects, I would assume wouldn't necessitate that, but that's a great question.
Okay. And then here's a question based upon the chart, and I guess that's going back to the one you're just referencing. There is no final liquidating harvest followed by replanting. I think I phrased that correctly. Based upon the chart, there's no final liquidating harvest followed by replanting.
Which chart? The.
Yep. So Conrad, if you want to type something more specific in there, maybe that would help Sarah answer the question.
Well, I would say that the larger goal of our program is to avoid a final liquidating harvest followed by replanting to that degree. Not that we wouldn't, you know, we would want a landowner to be able to capitalize on strong markets, potentially, you know, both during the program as well and after, but not entirely liquidate, because that would sort of negate the point of being in the carbon program.
Right. And here's a good question. It kind of ties back to what you said, but I don't think we totally addressed it. Or the answer wasn't there. So it's a 125-year project. How do you enforce that? You know, what are the contractual obligations? How are you, you know, that's a long time. So how do you know if the land is, I guess it's connected to the deed. Is that correct, as you said?
It is. So it is via the deed of the land. There's an MOA there. And then as far as just us as a company and enforcing, I guess, you know, there's a lot, honestly, I'd say less enforcement on the voluntary side than there is on the compliance side. And it's really up to us as Forest Carbon Works to decide what level of enforcement and monitoring we want to do. So we have structure in place to be checking properties via repeated monitoring, repeated inventories and verifications. And like we talked about yesterday, we'll likely be moving to a blend of remote, potentially. There's so many new technologies to complement those as we move forward in time. In the 100 years, we aren't, we're going to be relying on the landowner and annual reporting, and again, more of that remote data to help us monitor properties. And we ideally aren't going to have a need to visit a landowner's property in person because they're just in the legacy period. Potentially, if they do a harvest, when they harvest, potentially, but that's all that additional flexibility that I was mentioning, as far as like, we don't want to view it as enforcing. It's just more of like keeping an eye on and monitoring. And there's not a lot of monitoring that should need to be done, hopefully.
Yeah, it's kind of like a conservation easement. How do you monitor that?
Yeah.
So I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Somebody was asking, they were confused, and about the 50 cents and the dollar. I'm sorry, but what was the 50 cents and the dollar about?
Sure. Yeah. It's just that it was actually, that I think about it, it's like we start at it's 50 cents an acre up to $1,000, up to 1,000 acres. We're trying to incentivize larger land amounts to be brought in. And then we also have, therefore, it's kind of like a minimum acreage and dollar amount as well for landowners. And so it's 50 cents an acre up to 1,000 acres, and then it's combined for all of your lands that you bring in. And then once you get above the 1,000 acre mark, we'll pay $1 an acre.
Okay. So, and then you stated that you guys have a little bit of a different methodology for your FSC. What are the practices that a landowner has to do under FSC that would be different than what they might be doing already, given BMP laws, all of that? So what is that? What are those practices?
Probably they wouldn't be very different than normal outside of, so meeting FSC requirements will necessitate following BMP requirements, making, HCV, high conservation value areas. So making sure that those are appropriately mitigated or buffered, and we protect those if and when we have those. Those are two of the biggest areas with FSC. And so a lot of the FSC requirements, pretty much the majority of them are already taken care of by existing forest management plans. At least I know in the Northeast, how we write forest management plans really complements FSC requirements really well, as far as acknowledging and addressing high conservation value areas, BMPs, harvest timing, harvest schedule. So the biggest adaptation that may need to be made for FSC is really just format to plan and paperwork on our end, as far as just procedural documentation and forms that we complete to get the landowner certified. So it's honestly not that much work, and we don't want it to be work for the landowner. We'll take on all the burden of that for the landowner. If there's a harvest, it's really no different than any other harvest you would be doing, following your state requirements, potentially a change to be working toward carbon friendly forest management. At least that's the way that I see it. So
it's more of an acknowledgement of what the landowner is already doing. It's just now you're formalizing it, and you're paying for it, so it's no cost to the landowner. I know these certifications can just be an added layer of cost for something they're already doing. So it's interesting. So yesterday we discussed this as well. I know in the Southeast, this is a big issue, and this is kind of becoming norm for the carbon providers. But will you talk about natural disasters and the requirements or penalties, or just how that works now?
Yeah, so every parcel and every project contributes a certain percentage, around 15% of credits to a buffer pool to protect against natural disaster. And so if there was a reduce in volume or stocking on a property that would prohibit a landowner to be able to get credited, and essentially it could trigger what's called an unintentional reversal that would drop their stocking below that annual growth, or below the baseline. Then that's where it's like an insurance account. It would trigger that and help pay back those credits for the landowner for as long as is needed. If it dips down or is affected to the degree at which it can't recover, then the project would just be terminated. That parcel would be removed from the project and the landowner wouldn't be held accountable.
Right. So I think that that's a great way that these carbon programs are moving that way. We could certainly use some better, just in timber in general. You get nothing now. If you're a forest landowner and your timber's lost to a natural disaster, you don't get a tax write-off. You get no repayment for that lost timber. You do get some reforestation. So it's good to see that. And I think that was a big concern that's helping alleviate that question. So that's great to see. Moving to your reforestation land project, so is that 6,500 acres? It sounds like that's kind of your test isn't the right word, but it's your pilot program. Was that land purchased by Forest Carbon Works? Is that how it currently is?
Yeah, it was. It wasn't actually purchased by, it was purchased by Chestnut Carbon. And so the goal being to partner with local agencies and organizations, ultimately with those lands, to put them into conservation easement and to determine some form of a next chapter for those properties. And so we're working with local contractors and to manage the properties as far as site preparation, forest management, and tree planting activities. And it's been, and we actually have a stakeholder consultation meeting that we're planning in Little Rock, Arkansas, coming up on December 2nd, for which is part of just the development of this whole program. Where we've invited the neighbors of all of these properties and a whole bunch of different stakeholders, organizations at all different levels, to provide input on what we're doing, since it's hopefully going to be fairly, it'll have an effect on some of the local community. But it's been a really fun program to be developing and building.
Yeah. And so once that's you're through that process, you're opening it up to any landowners who are in ag land now to be part of that. And is that a 125-year commitment as well?
We're finalizing, we're calling it our lease program, and we're finalizing the full commitment of that right now. So it's a little preliminary, as far as, trying to get the word out, as far as I felt like this would be just a great opportunity to start talking about it. And, we would like that commitment to mirror all of our conservation program, but the specifics are all of our forest carbon program, as far as, we're in it for, long term is who we are at Forest Carbon Works. And that's the final, we're putting together the final details on that lease right now, as far as like how many years will the landowner get paid. Those are some of those final details that we need, but I don't, we will have those details together very soon. And so again, that's why I felt like I would, it was worth bringing up.
Definitely.
Because, the sooner the better, as far as how our planning is going for this program. And please, I'm happy to talk about it offline if anyone wants.
Yeah. And I think that's a good takeaway is, Sarah here, Forest Carbon Works. If you have questions, you're interested in exploring it, but you're just not quite sure whether it's Sarah or someone on her team, that's what this is all about. There is a there is a broad program in place and and there's specifics, but everybody landowner is different. I know we had yesterday, I think, a great question. Is somebody said, well, what if we kind of are thinking we're going to go through a pretty major timber harvesting, not major, but a typical timber harvesting, and then we'd like to think about entering the program. And the response was, yes, that's definitely doable and feasible. It's just something we have to work out. So I think it's all about, not always, but the landowners we work with and represent, it is about the economic viability of the landowner. If we can keep the landowner economically viable, and you even said that at the beginning of your presentation, then we can keep forest and forest use. And so it's a discussion, it's a process. I think just like you said with your reforestation, it's not set in stone, because maybe this go around you're trying to see what works. Let's see what works before we get into the specifics. And so we're at the very front of this. And I think it's been a great collaboration. We're getting more into what's working for the landowners, what's credible for the buyer, what's workable and affordable for all the other parties. That's what we'd like to see talk about. So any other final thoughts, whether from you, Sarah, or if anybody wants to type anything in? Otherwise, we're coming up on top of the hour, so we can wrap it up. Any other closing remarks?
I mean, this is just great. Again, I just really appreciate this entire series, all of the support and between the sponsorships and all of the other participants as well. And this has just been a really nice dialogue. I think I mentioned this yesterday too. I mean, we're all really working toward the same goal. And it's been just really great to see how far we're all getting, I think, and how the field is evolving, and just how many opportunities exist now for landowners, not only landowners, for all of us, I think. And so I'm just really, it's just really exciting. And so again, thank you for doing this, and I'm just really excited to see where we go next.
Yep. And thank you. And as always, our webinars are posted on our Forest Carbon University section of our website, all of the contact information. And you can always contact me if you want to have follow-up discussions, or Sarah, or someone on Sarah's team. So thank you everyone for joining today, and we'll be in touch. Take care.
Thanks.
Thank you.